Welcome to The Explainer. Today we are diving deep into a book that really challenges how we talk about addiction. It's called Addiction and the Medicalization of Conspicuous Behaviour, and its core ideas, well, they might just make you rethink a lot of things you thought you knew. All right, so let's get right into it. We have to start with the story that most of us are familiar with. The official story. It's the one we hear constantly, and honestly, it's pretty compelling. I mean, think about it. We see this everywhere, don't we? On the news, in movies, from our doctors. The message is usually the same. Addiction is a problem inside the person. It's a disease, a flaw, something wrong with their brain, or maybe even their spirit. This whole idea is often called the brain disease model of addiction. And it tells a very powerful story. That some things are so thrilling, so potent, that they can literally hijack a person's brain. It makes it seem like anyone could fall victim, leading to this total, compulsive loss of control. It's a story that basically says, watch out, this could happen to you. But what if that's not the whole picture? That's the huge question this book poses. It suggests that maybe, just maybe, if we really want to understand what's going on, we need to stop staring so hard at the individual's brain and turn the camera around to look at our society instead. And here is the absolute core argument. The book says that addiction isn't so much a proven medical fact, like, say, diabetes, but that it's a powerful label that we use. Think about how we might call one person who works 80 hours a week incredibly driven, but another person doing the exact same thing a workaholic. The behavior is the same, right? But the label and what it implies is totally different. To really get what's going on here, we have to talk about this term medicalization. It sounds kind of academic, but it's something that happens all the time. It's when totally normal parts of human life, like feeling sad or being shy, get repackaged as medical conditions, like clinical depression or social anxiety disorder. Suddenly, it's not just life, it's a problem for doctors to solve. This slide just lays it out so perfectly. You've got two completely different ways of looking at things. The biomedical model points its finger at one person and asks, what's wrong with your brain? But the sociological model, it looks at the whole system and asks a much more uncomfortable question. Who actually benefits from calling this behavior an addiction? So how does the book actually build this case? Well, it does it by pulling on 5 different, what it calls critical threads. And each thread helps to unravel that conventional story we're all so used to hearing. So these 5 threads are basically our roadmap for the rest of this explainer. We're going to go from questioning the science behind the brain disease idea to looking at so-called behavioral addictions and all the way to uncovering how big corporations might actually be profiting from all this. Okay, so first up, the book takes a hard look at the science we see splashed across headlines. It argues that a lot of what we hear is neurohype. Those exciting stories with colorful brain scans that suggest we found the addiction center of the brain. The book argues that this media spin often gets way ahead of what the science can actually prove or do for people in the real world. Now, this second thread is where it gets really, really interesting. Just look at this list. When we start talking about being addicted to things that don't even involve a chemical substance, like shopping or exercise, it starts to become super clear that what we're often doing is just making a moral judgment. We're basically putting a negative label on a passion that we've decided has gone too far. The book's third thread is about risk, but I want to jump to the fourth because it is so important. It digs into the hidden judgments we make. So what does this quote mean? Well, basically, our society really, really values people who are productive and have a lot of self-control. So any behavior that looks unproductive or out of control gets seen as the polar opposite of that ideal citizen. It gets pathologized. And of course, the final thread, it follows the money. It shows how some really powerful industries, from casinos to social media companies, get pretty clever with the language of addiction. They might promote responsible gaming to avoid tougher laws, all while designing their apps with what are called dark patterns that are literally engineered to keep you hooked and scrolling. So, okay, if addiction is a label, who gets to stick it on people? It's easy to think it's just doctors in white coats, but the book argues it's way more complicated. It's actually a kind of negotiation between some very powerful players. And this triangle illustrates that negotiation perfectly. You've got medical experts on one corner. You've got these big institutions, think pharmaceutical giants or insurance companies, on another. And then on the third corner, you have us, the patients or clients. The book argues that all 3 of these groups are involved in creating and maintaining these medical categories. So that brings up a really critical question. Who wins when more and more of our behaviors get labeled as addictions? Well, the book points to two major beneficiaries. First, you have the troubled persons industries, this huge economy of clinics, drug companies, and therapists that literally makes money from our problems. And second, on an ideological level, it reinforces this idea that we should all be productive and in control 24/7. All of this brings us to the book's really big central concept, a new term for the kind of actions that are most at risk of being slapped with that addiction label. And that term is conspicuous behavior. It's basically any intense passion or hobby that stands out, that seems a little too much for other people. You could be a gamer who plays for 10 hours straight, a passionate collector, a marathon runner who never misses a training day. The book's point is that these passions are really vulnerable to being called addictions by a society that's always on the lookout for a new problem to cure. And this is where it gets kind of wild. The list of things we can supposedly be addicted to just keeps getting longer. Being passionately in love, being super dedicated to your fitness routine, even just taking time to relax. If it looks like it's taking away from your work or your duties, it can be framed as a problem. The line between a healthy passion and an unhealthy obsession is getting more and more blurry. So this is the big, provocative thought the book leaves us with. In a world where almost any passion can be twisted into an addiction, who is it that gets to decide where that line is drawn? And maybe, just maybe, the most important question is, what are their real motives for drawing it there?